Got a semi-quiet night tonight. Ain't got a little time on my hands, and so we were talking a little bit earlier, locally in person with quite a few folks. No one cares about that. Quite a few folks about how we got started. You know, in business. Period. There's plenty of people who think like that I come from, you know, massive generational wealth because I'm very good at creating the foundations of generational wealth. But that expertise really came from not, coming from any generational wealth at all, but to an extent being around it. I was lucky enough to have some proximity based on the the trade skills of my father. So one thing that people of substance need are trade skills. They always need electricians, plumbers, carpenters, all that stuff. They normally have assets that need upkeep and all of that. So trade skills will get you proximity. And my dad had a lot of advanced trade skills that took months and months and months to implement. And so he had a lot of jobs that he lived at, and that I would live there with him. So that is definitely where it started, is gaining that proximity. But proximity is not everything. So, came up very kind of normal for my area. Was born in project housing, born in government housing. By the age of like 4, we had, gotten out of government housing and went directly to the hood. So it was actually worse. Because in government housing, if you mess up, you catch a case, you do something crazy, you'll get kicked out, of government housing. Now you're essentially homeless. So people actually act a bit better there, and they typically have, like our place had security that lived there, and there was like a police state, like the state police barracks was directly across the street from the projects, right? And then the city police, of course, patrolled frequently as well. So the projects were actually better than the part of the city that we ended up getting out of the projects and moving to. So we got out the projects and moved to the hood. And then you don't get kicked out of the hood, when you catch a case or when you drop a body or, do something crazy. So it was actually crazier, when we bought the family house. And that was it. That was the house that I was in, basically up until, whatever, 16. I guess technically even 18 actually. But that was it. That was the house from 4 to 18. I was in that house in the hood. Now, the hood transformed eventually, right? Like we were in the worst part of the city, and then the worst part of the city like shifted to the south side. So like, you know, crime moved away from us rather than us moving away from crime. But it was interesting to say the least. It was interesting to kind of have both of those things happening at the same time. Where I remember I must have been 6. I had to be 6. I remember being in the backyard playing marbles, right? Like had a stick, you dig a circle in the dirt, and you have a hole in the middle, and you got a big marble and little marbles, and you're playing this game that you can play by yourself. So I'm in the backyard. We had a fence, like a fenced off backyard, like I'm safe, right? Whatever. So in the backyard playing marbles. Mom is cooking. I don't remember where dad was. Maybe he was at work or something. And homeboy jumps the fence. There was a parade going on called Edgar Steele's Day Parade. I don't know. Still to this day, don't know who Edgar Steele is, and I don't care. But it was some kind of like ethnic holiday. And so homeboy jumps over the fence. Somebody's chasing him. Somebody else jumps over the fence after him, shoots him right there in the backyard. You know what I mean? Dude drops over dead. I'm 6. Other dude jumps over the fence. I didn't even see him. Like to this, it's one of those things where if you had seen him, you remember his face forever. I didn't see him at all. I saw the guy who died, but I didn't see the guy who shot him. And so some sort of defense, and he's out, right? So like that's the type of nonsense that's happening, in the neighborhood as a 6-year-old, right? And so I even remember the cop who showed up first. He wasn't I don't remember the investigative like officer or whatever, but the officer who showed up first was at the time the only black officer on the police department for the entire city. His name was William Hall. He later became a judge, and so Officer Hall showed up, first, and he was the only one that was like a real cop, right? So luckily, I got a taste of that. Like you might be doing something crazy, and he pulls up, and all the kids scatter, right? Like, I don't know, you're spray painting something, you're tagging something, I don't know what you're doing. You're out past curfew, whatever. All the kids run, right? The other cops, they were starting to get into this thing where these cops were coming from out of town and like didn't know anybody, didn't care, they were all the same color, blah, 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 right? And so those cops would chase you and, try to tase you and beat you with a stick and all kinds of nonsense, right? But Bill Hall knew everybody. So like I remember the one time, I don't even remember what we were doing, so I can't even tell you what we were doing. But we did whatever. He showed up, all the kids ran, and he didn't chase anybody. And we were like, we got away from him, all that. We got home, and Bill Hall was in your mama's house drinking tea, eating crumpets with your mom. Because he knew exactly where you were going, exactly whose boy you were, like all of that, right? Like he was like the last real cop, that the first and last real cop that I like had interacted with. And so, I mean, that was crazy. He was the one who arrived after this person had been like randomly murdered in the backyard, and me as a 6-year-old kid, being the only one there who saw it. And I mean, he was just cool about it, right? So that's where I came from. I didn't really like come from a bunch of wealth. I didn't like, even though, I do generational wealth for a living, that's not where I came from. But I did have proximity to it. I don't think it would have crossed my mind had I not had proximity to it as a kid through my dad. And my dad wasn't wealthy, but he did jobs for the wealthy, right? So he built houses for them. He built like custom, yacht, not the whole yacht, but he did a custom yacht, like improvements. So he would build like yacht engines from scratch. Trying to remember the name of the company, Perkins. He had a certification from Perkins for yacht diesel engines that he had earned in the Caribbean. So he was like a marine engineer, but he came to the United States and they would not respect his like engineering degree essentially. So when that happens, wealthy people will pass you. Like if you know your stuff and you're really good, but just for whatever reason your credentials aren't respected, wealthy people will pass you around. Right? Definitely. So he was a full-out engineer. He was an architectural engineer. He was an aerospace engineer. He did some jet engines and stuff like that. He was a marine diesel engine, engineer. So he worked for quite a few people. He actually did work for Trump way back in the day, way before he ever even thought about being a president. But he built a house for him in New Jersey. Never met him. It was just one of those things where, like, once that group of people know you, you're doing jobs for them all the time. So that was my proximity, you know what I mean? Because the jobs that he would do, if they called him out, like we went to Florida to build this house, and the guy who wanted it built called it the glass house, and it was like the entire house was virtually glass, and the parts of the house that you shouldn't be able to see through were like smoked glass. It had a hydro like generation system that my dad designed, where essentially the inner walls were about this thick, right? About 6 inches thick of like a plexiglass. And it was like blocks of plexiglass. And there was this really thin like glass layer. And then there was a hole about a foot. And then there was the outer wall, which was like these square blocks of like bulletproof plexi, right? So they were like, I don't know, 4 foot maybe, like 4 by 4 foot plexi blocks on the outside, right? So somebody trying to break it from the outside, impossible. From the inside, you have like a half a foot of plexi, and then you had this one space in the middle. Well, that space in the middle, he filled with all water, and he had a generator, like a turbine, that was turned by the water that moved through there. And then there was solar up on the roof, and there was some kind of geothermal unit in the basement. And so this house was powered by the water that was in the wall, and you could heat that water or cool that water. And there were these little concaves that kind of looked like a speaker. Like when you take a speaker off the shape that the speaker has, there were these little sections all over the walls, all over the house. And so that little, like, thin piece of glass that was in between that open space and these concaves would actually let heat come through, or AC come through, depending on the heat of the water inside. Hey, Momo, how are you? And so that's the kind of engineer he was. Like, he built shit like that and didn't know how to patent it because he wasn't from this country, and like, so rich people love taking advantage of it. So, but that put me in a position where, all right, if you have to live at a place for the next 18 months in order, to build this, crazy house or whatever, then either like I'm gonna stay at home, and then what, right? Or I'm gonna be with you, right? And so luckily, most of the people that he worked for, like, weren't racist pricks, and there was like a kid in the house, and they recognized it as such, and just treated me like all the other kids in the house. And so I was privy to, you know, breakfast conversations and dinner conversations and stuff like that that I would not have been privy to in any other situation. So that proximity definitely helped. I understood kind of what wealth was in a way that my peers didn't, because of that. So that's interesting. And it kind of goes back to cultural capital, which I talk about all the time, right? It goes back to that transmission of cultural capital and how important that is. If you can make that thinking come naturally by transmitting it to your kids, that's half the battle on keeping generational wealth going, right? So let's see. It sounds like a Ramir house my buddy built in Arizona, off grid and self contained. Yeah, I mean, it definitely was. Unfortunately, he's passed, so I can't really call him anymore and ask him for all the specifics. We spoke about it a couple of times though, because the glass house thing was cool. I remember he used like smoke glass for like the bathrooms at the time. The technology to like press a button and like frost the glass and press a button and the glass on frost, that didn't exist. So rooms that were supposed to be private had this smoke glass or this frosted glass, depending on how private it was supposed to be. So like rooms where you didn't even really need privacy had this frosted thing. You could like see silhouettes, but it had this frosted thing, and he kept using gaps for like sound control. So you could see people moving, but you couldn't like hear them, because you have these air gaps, between the walls for like sound control. And then if it was supposed to be like really private, like a shower or a toilet or bathroom or whatever, then it was like blacked out glass, right? And so it was pretty interesting. And I don't remember every aspect of it because I was so young. But I remember thinking like, this is the coolest house I've ever seen. Like I want to live in this house. So there's that. But yeah. So that's how I got started. I did move to Kenya. Yes, I did. So yeah, a lot of people do think that like I come from generational wealth, but I don't. Have I created generational wealth for my children? Yes, I absolutely have. But did I come from it? No. So do you have to come from it? No, you really don't. But you do. It does take intention. Like even for me, I just got that that little bit of exposure up until maybe 12 or 13. And I don't know if my dad like instinctively or intuitively knew like, oh, he's not cute anymore. Like Now he's damn near 6 foot tall. Now he's a threat. Nobody wants him around their house anymore, or around their daughter, or like, I don't know what it was, but there came a time where like I stopped going to work with my dad, and like, either stayed at home, or by then my mom had started doing living jobs as well, and so it was interesting. But yeah, definitely takes like some intention to get it going from there. You know what I mean? Oh, very cool, very cool. Yeah, I wish you all the best out there. Yeah. No, I'm still. We're live on TikTok and YouTube, so we're on both. Yeah. So if I'm answering something that you're not reading in the comments, it's the other stream. First, so did I have a first job or a first business? Man, you're taking me back. No, I had a business first. I had a business first. I'm not sure I looked at it that way though, but I had a business first. I taught. Damn, what was the address of that place? Washington Street in Reading, Pennsylvania. Might have been 650 Washington Street or something like that. Maybe 750. There was a YMCA, and I taught self-defense classes there because I've been doing martial arts since I was 6 years old. So right around 16 years old, I did self-defense classes there, like 2 hours a week, 4 days a week. But I was paid as a contractor. So that, I suppose, was technically my first business. And I think I treated it as a hobby. I couldn't even tell you whether it was successful or not. I just did it for a couple of years. And then I did get a job at a sandwich shop, not a sandwich shop, a gas station that made sandwiches, right? So if you're from the Pennsylvania, New Jersey, I think they have a couple in New York. They have them in Virginia and all that. There's a gas station called Wawa, and then you can get like sandwiches there as well. I think it started as a sandwich shop in Philly, and then they started getting in the gas or whatever. So I took a night shift job at a Wawa, and I stayed there. I don't know, maybe a year. Maybe a year I stayed there, and then I went back to martial arts and like opened up an actual like martial arts school, and then that was like my first real, like it was registered with the state of Pennsylvania and like tax ID number and all of that. And then the worst thing that could happen happened. That business was incredibly successful. You want to fail first. You want to fail first. You want to fail fast. You want to fail forward. That business was incredibly successful. And so the downside to that was now I expected all other businesses to be incredibly successful, and as easy as that. But the ease of that business was really due to my perception, right? Because I started that business the same year that I won the world championship. So as a world champion, number one in my federation for fighting, number one in my federation for forms, all of that. It was always all over the newspapers and all of that type of stuff back then. So it actually was really easy for me to build that school and like get that business going, and it paid for everything. It paid for my car note. It paid for my home. It paid for my girlfriend's car. It paid all of that. So it paid for everything in itself. It was great, and we did it for 5 years, and then I wanted to expand into something else, and then that's where the first failure hit. And then that failure hit probably a bit deeper than it should have, because I expected success because the very first business was a success. Any suggestions to invest or portfolio because of the war in the Middle East other than moving? Northrop. I think everything I have in Northrop has been doing really, really good, because they make ships. And they make ships and cruise missiles, I think. So I mean, obviously that stuff. But so I come out the other end of this really successful business, try to step it to the next level. I move to, my mom dies. I move to China, and I'm gonna like utilize China, like take this company to the next level as well, right? Because the Chinese kung fu, the martial arts was Chinese kung fu. So I go to China, go from master to grandmaster, which I could only do there. There was nobody in America who could, whatever, in my style anyway. So I go to China, spend 2 years there. I'm like, all right, I'm gonna learn traditional Chinese medicine. I'm gonna finish off the martial arts, come back as a grandmaster that can do acupuncture and moxibustion and herbology and all of that stuff. And I'm going to focus on the medicine as the main business. And then I'm going to take very specific martial arts disciples who are like martial arts purists who like really want to learn it the right way, and not care about making money on that side of the business at all. And so, so in the mix of all of that, the subprime crisis hit. So the economy hit, and that thing crashed and burned, right? But I came back. It's so interesting because I came back from China finding out about Bitcoin, but everything crashed, right? So everything crashed, and to the point where I'm like homeless, right? Like that, it completely failed. But I knew, like in China, there was no question. Everybody was like, Bitcoin is it, right? So I knew, and at the time, there's this thing called mining, and mining is how you kind of get coins for free. Like you mine the coins out of the blockchain, right? And so at the time, you could only mine with a CPU. And so I'm telling like all these folks around me, you got to get into Bitcoin. Like you got to start mining. Like mind you, I just lost everything. I'm freaking homeless, so I'm obviously not able to take my own advice at that moment, right? But I'm telling everybody I know, like mortgage your shit, like start mining this stuff, like it's gonna win. I still have people who call me like, I wish I would have listened to you. And so I couldn't do it, obviously. Like I need to be housed first off, right? But everybody I know, I'm telling them get into it. And like one person kind of listened. His wife gave him a whole lot of shit about it, so he ended up caving under that pressure. Then his wife ended up cheating on him and divorcing him, so probably shouldn't have listened to her. But he was the only one who actually mined like something. Like he was like, listen, this dude is like into it with this. And I remember him coming back to me and be like, I got like 7 Bitcoin, which is like, at the time, it was when, Bitcoin had like really went up and through the roof. And at the time, those 7 Bitcoin represented almost $1 million. Like it was crazy. Right. I remember him coming back to me and be like, yo, if I would have done what you said to do and like leaned into it and really, really like mined the hell out of this stuff. There was a website back then. Like this is to tell you how crazy it was in the early days when nobody, cared or thought that it was going to be anything. There was a website that was trying to like compete with Google or something. It was a search engine website. And if you would go to this website and run 10 searches a day, they would give you a Bitcoin, the whole thing, like a full Bitcoin. But at the time, you could pay like, I don't know, $10 for 100 Bitcoin. Like it was nothing. But they just knew it was going to be everything. Like So that becomes the thing, is that you can be, in this situation where you really, really know what's going on. But because of your circumstances, there's nothing you can do about it, and it can jade you. Try to not let that happen. I've been through quite a bit of that myself. Try to get to the other side of that if you can. I've seen a lot of people just fall off because they were in that position. Hey, Samara, what's up? But yeah, so yeah, try to get past that. Oh, I just got time tonight. It's only 8. It's like 8:47. So yeah, that. So now I'm flowing through that. How did I bounce back from the homelessness? Let me think about that. I was homeless for like about 18 months, I guess. Yeah, about 18 months. I came out of homelessness with with generational wealth set up for kids that I didn't have, right? So, motivation for sure. Um, Came out of homelessness, ended up picking up cans, like, you know, I would go to, how everybody has like that bar stroll, right? So like there's this one street in our town, it was called Penn Street. And there's a bunch of bars up and down this street. And then there's alleyways behind the bars on either side of the street. There's like alleyways in between that and the next street, right? And so I would go pull the cans out of the trash, crush the cans, put them in, trash bags, and then carry them to the recycling center, which was, what was the name of that street? It was like on one of the southernmost streets in the city. There was this recycling center there, but they liked it when you brought things in like transparent trash bags, because people would put like cinder blocks in with the cans and try to get more weight and all of that shit, right? So I would bring in there, oh man, like maybe 20 bags of crushed cans, right? So you crush them so you can fit more cans in the bag, right? And then you get to a point, like at the time, I don't know if they still do this, probably not because it's probably expensive, but at the time, like Miller Lite had steel cans, right? So like the other folks had aluminum cans, but there were a couple places that had steel cans, and that's like a whole different price tag, right? Versus the aluminum cans. So you learn stuff like that or whatever. But I did that, and I don't know, maybe I made like 400 or 500 bucks a week recycling cans, right? And then took like 200 bucks and set up generational wealth for the kids that I didn't have, right? Just so they would never have to be in the situation that I was in, right? That was just my mindset. So even at my lowest, I sacrificed to make sure that the next generation had something, which is why sometimes it annoys me when people are not at their lowest and are too selfish to set up generational wealth for the next generation. But anyway, so there I am. I'm homeless. So I'm collecting these cans, crushing them, turning them into the recycling center, and then making sure that the next generation, when they finally come, will not have to deal with this ever. So I'm setting up that generational wealth for them, getting that going, and moving forward from there. Right? I would pick up cans with friends and would keto the metal tabs and turn them into. Oh, gotcha. Yeah. so, so yeah, there was that, and then from there, what did I do? From there, I think I went, because of the martial arts thing. I went towards like security, and so like I went into security. Then I became high level security. Got certified as like armed security, and then got certified through this. They were kind of an agency and an academy. They were called ESI. So this guy named Jim Dugan, he was like I think he was like an ex-Navy SEAL or something. But he created this academy where they essentially trained bodyguards. And so it was all just like a progressive movement for me. So I went that route as well, and and did all of that stuff, and then got back into business. You know what I mean? Finally got myself to a place where I could get back into business, and then started focusing on enhancing the community. And so that started with, getting grant funding and getting government contracting and that type of stuff, and helping people create companies and figuring out how to make LLCs and S corps and all that stuff. And so started up that journey doing that, and then we realized that even the folks that had the black owned business, it was really just a black owned storefront for a white supply chain, which didn't make very much sense. And so we were like, all right, we gotta start controlling supply chain. We got to start creating, you know, manufacturing and production. And then that didn't make sense to try and create U.S. manufacturing and production right when China was ramping up its stuff. And so it was like, all right, it's going to cost an arm and a leg to create, U.S. led manufacturing and production. And then after we do that, we can't compete with Chinese pricing. So what's the point? Like it didn't make sense. And then that's what drove us overseas. All right. So at that point, that's what drove us overseas to the point where we were like, all right, now let's get over to, Africa. Let's figure this thing out because maybe we can reach out to our extended community. And over there, we can create the manufacturing, push it to our retail centers over here, and, go from there. And during that process and like seeing if that was feasible and like doing feasibility studies and all of that stuff and impact reports and all of that stuff is where we found out that that's literally what everyone else does to gain political power and financial freedom as a community, right? And it just hadn't dawned on us. And so that's when I found out that like Chinatown and all of those places, they were burnt down just like Black Wall Street until they connected the economic activity of those locations back to another country, even if it was a country that they didn't really agree with, right? Because that's why when you go to Chinatown people speak Cantonese, right? Which is really like the language of Hong Kong. And at the time, Hong Kong was part of Britain. So most of the Chinatowns were actually not trying to connect themselves to mainland China. They were trying to connect themselves to like Hong Kong and Taiwan and all of that, right? It's like if you go to like Chinatown in Boston, they actually fly a Taiwanese flag, right? So, that type of stuff. But it didn't matter as long as they connected their economic activity to an overseas GDP. That's what stopped the burnings and the destruction of those economic zones. And I didn't realize that till I started doing the research. And so it was like, oh, that's what we've never done. Like, yeah, we made the Black Wall Streets, and yeah, we did all the things, but it was always standalone. We never connected it to anything. And every time we try to connect it to something, some weird movement would pop up, seemingly run by people that look like us, telling us that we're not connected to other people that look like us. Like every time we try to do it, that happens, right? To keep us from doing it when there's a 100% success rate of every other minority group in the United States doing it and gaining political power and gaining financial freedom via doing such, right? So it's odd, coincidence. I think not that always happens when we're looking to do something like that. And so that's what got us into looking, into Africa in the first place. And so, being a service provider, B2B for nonprofits and all that for so long, and creating companies and doing strategy structures and all of that stuff for folks, and strategic, planning and business planning and all of that stuff, put us into a position where when people wanted to, do business abroad, they would come to us and we would figure it out for them. And so we had quite a few companies come to us that wanted to expand into, Africa, which allowed us the ability to do quite a bit of due diligence across the continent. So we were able to do due diligence in about 34, different African countries and see what it was like in those countries and what it was like to do business there and all of that. And Kenya was by far the best that we had dealt with, and was in the top two, but by far infrastructure wise easily the best. And so we ended up coming here, and right before we did that, I had heard this story about Malcolm X and this Kenyan senator, I think he was a senator, named Pio Gama Pento, and them thinking that Kenya was the answer, for, the followers of Malcolm X that were going to follow him out of the country and seek kind of a nation of their own elsewhere. And so they were planning on doing that in Kenya. And then they were both assassinated within 2 weeks of of deciding to do that. So that was pretty interesting. And they were both assassinated in like similar circumstances. So Pio Gamapento was the first Kenyan politician assassinated after independence. And then we know what went down with Malcolm. So that was really interesting. And then when I got here, I really felt like I understood, like I saw what Malcolm saw. I'm sure that's not true, right? 60 years later, right? But it felt that way to me, and so it was like, all right, I get it. And so it's been Kenya ever since. There were a bunch of little like micro businesses in there that failed here and failed there and all of that stuff. But I failed forward with all of those kind of micro businesses and pivots and all of that. So it got to the point where by the time I got here, it just made sense to buy a law firm, and start getting the vertical integration going. And then it was like pulling teeth to get members of the community to set up, manufacturing and production and all of that. And so, but people started talking about relocating. So that wasn't even our initial, focus. Our initial focus was creating that Chinatown style situation. But again, you can only lead a horse to water. You can't make them drink. So we, at that time, I don't know what the new census numbers indicate, but at the time when we started, the census numbers indicated that of all black-owned businesses, 0.86% were in manufacturing and production, right? So it was like absurd. It was pathetic, quite frankly. And the first client that was all about doing it, her granddaughter had been killed by police officers. And then the chief of police was like, this guy needs to be in prison. Like, he was completely out of line. The granddaughter was not the source of the call. She was just like a little girl walking down the street, coming home from school. And it was almost like a drive-by stray. You know what I mean? Like, the cop was completely shooting else at someone else and like hit her instead. And so everybody thought that the cop, should be dealt with. The union defended the cop because he paid his union. Makes sense. But then she found that she had this like trophy business. So like if you won like employee of the month, that type of stuff. If you wore like T-shirts to go out to an amusement park like with your company, she was a place that like did all of that. She had those corporate accounts. And the place that she got her T-shirts from was the number one donor to the police union. So it hit her hard that like the murder of her granddaughter was being kept, out of prison by the company, or by the union, and that the company that she does business with the most is the number one donor to the union. So it felt like her black-owned business money was the money that was keeping, this particular, cop out of jail. And so she was like, I'm done paying these people who do not have, our community's, best, wishes at heart. And so we should create our own manufacturing, and we should manufacture our own shirts, and we should So it took that. It took somebody murdering her granddaughter for her to be like, oh, wait, maybe we should control our own supply chain. You know what I mean? It's like, that's how hard it was. You know what I mean? People were worried about like this thing, like they were worried about whether people liked us when we lived in communities where law enforcement hated us. Like, when you hate somebody, you'll take their life. When you don't like somebody, you just don't talk to them. And they were worried about whether or not people liked us. While people who hated us were taking our lives daily. What's up, Em? Love to see you. And so it was crazy. It was like you wanted to slap people every day because the shit they were concerned about was so backwards, right? But it took stuff like that. Like, people had to be murdered for them to want to control their own supply chain. It was nuts. How's your daughter doing? Love them. It's always good to see you. And so, so yeah, that was the first ever client that was like, oh yeah, let me go set up that manufacturing. And then, now it does sound like a good idea. And so, it was tough. It was tough. And it was one of those things like when you're doing that kind of work, and it's not moving people the way that you feel as though it should. The plus side is it teaches you how to find your target. Oh, thank you for the gift. Thank you very much. It teaches you how to find your target client, right? Oh, that's all good to hear that. And it teaches you how to like not care about anybody else, right? That was super duper important. That was a great lesson to. It's the way that Apple sells its iPhones. It's the way it's specialists operate, and I think I needed all those failures and lessons to actually like learn what it took to be a specialist and speak to your specialized, clientele, and that is it. Um, and so it's interesting because it brought matter became viable. It put me in a situation once again where the bonds. Oh, thank you. On our target clients only, right? And not, you know, there's this thing called signal versus noise, right? And when you're focused on signal, right? And you block out as much noise as possible. And customers or prospects, and even like fake prospects, are noise, right? Your target clients are the only signal. And so it was actually a beautiful thing to go through all of those failures to get where I could lock in like that on signal and completely block out noise. So like criticism is noise. Feedback is like, but there's a difference. You can't give feedback if you've never been a client or a customer, right? If you got something to say, but you've never done business with that organization, then it's just criticism, right? But if you do business with an organization and you give them feedback, then that's ultra, valuable. And so again, like I said, Apple uses, uses that philosophy, and you can see it. Like what Android users say should be in an iPhone has never moved Apple. They've never acted on it. They don't care because Android users are never going to buy an Apple device. They're not the target client of Apple. They're the antithesis thereof, right? And they don't care. And I'm an Android user, by the way, right? So they don't care what Android users have to say about their phones. They're not doing it, right? And so they only listen to feedback. They only listen to people who have bought iPhones. They do not care what anybody who hasn't bought an iPhone has to say about an iPhone, right? And so that's the kind of focus that you have to lock onto if you're a specialist. If you're a generalist and you're doing general business with everybody, then that's different because you're a generalist. So then you kind of have to listen to everybody in general. But if you're a specialist, you should be locked on signal and you shouldn't care what anybody who's not doing business with you has to say, right? And it took a while. It took probably 20 years. 20 years to get to that point where I can lock on signal, and move forward from there. So, and then at the end of the 20 years, once I got locked on signal, everybody was like, oh, you came out of nowhere. overnight success came out of nowhere. Now it was 25 years. 25 years to that overnight success. So that's the way it works. Nobody sees you until you're there. And then everybody sees you and they're like, oh, where'd you come from? Just came out of nowhere. You're an overnight success guy. It's so easy. It's so easy. You just did it overnight. So that's the way it works. That's the whole story. Hey, hey, how's it going, Jim? Yeah, no, you know what? It was really clear how to create the vertical integration once you're on Signal. So you never know what to do when you're not on Signal, right? When you're like when you're listening to everyone in general and you're letting the noise in, you'll never know what to do. You'll be spinning your tires in the mud. You never know what to do. Once you get on Signal, and there's a specific person you're listening to, and that's the only person you're listening to, then you always know what to do, right? And so then pivoting becomes super easy. Running your business, knowing what to offer and what not to offer becomes super easy, very clear. That is what everyone thinks: music, money, investments, inventions, etc. Out of the mud. Yeah, 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 definitely. I wish I would have copied more. Yeah, if I could, oh, excuse me, if I could go back and tell myself to do anything, I would tell myself to copy more. We got this thing in our community: don't bite on me, don't bite off me, you biting, where we think you're not supposed to copy things. And you absolutely are. so, you should improve those things. You should add value in different ways or whatever, but you absolutely, are supposed to, copy premises. The whole thing is, especially if you're going to be a specialist. If you're a specialist, then essentially your skill set can't be duplicated, right? So, copy in what way? Like the Chinese? Well, yeah, like some of the Chinese, right? Like we can't like lump them all together because there were like junk copy Chinese as well, right? Where they would like make really cheap, not even in just cost, but like cheap, and quality version of things. Like that's a different thing, right? But the Chinese who like were copying systems and then implementing those systems, and then building the skills that they needed to really to be like in our family, right? And so because writing, we also understand like fine writing, utensils. And so there's a Chinese company called Jin, and they copy pen designs, right? So you can get like a Jinhao fountain pen that's a copy of like a Pilot custom, right? Now, so like a Pilot custom is going to run you anywhere, depending on which custom it is, it's going to run you anywhere between like $450 to like $1,200. You can get a Chinese Jinhao, which would be a copy of a Pilot custom, and you can get it for like $100, right? Now, it's high quality. It's not as high quality as the Pilot, right? But it's high quality, and they do a different thing. They're not like trying to copy like their campaign, right? They're not like trying to copy their marketing. They found the hole in the market of writers that don't want to spend $1,200 for a pen, but do want a vanishing point, for example, right? Or they want, which a vanishing point, I don't know, it's like a $600 pen, whatever. But you can get the Jinhao version of a vanishing point for probably $80, right? So they want the experience of a vanishing point, but like absolutely not, pay that price. So they're not actually competing with Pilot, right? But they did copy the model to get into the industry, right? And so in that sense, it makes a lot of sense to like create clones. You know what I mean? That makes sense. Like the guy from Ghana, he copied the most successful businessman, and now he's a billionaire. Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. There were these two European billionaires that's all they did. They copied, what was it? They copied Airbnb and essentially forced Airbnb to buy it, because it had so much market share in Europe that like Airbnb couldn't break into the market, so they had to like buy it from them. And it was literally just a copy. They just copied it in Europe, and then they copied eBay. That was their first copy. They copied eBay in Europe, and then I think it was also eBay. They made eBay like buy it from them in order to get into the European market. So they just like straight up, I think they tried to copy Amazon as well, um, and just get acquired. So like that was their business model, like copy things that are doing well in America that haven't come to Europe yet, build up the market share in Europe, and then if those companies want European market share, they just have to acquire, the business from them. So yeah, definitely I would do a hell of a lot more of that. And I would have probably done more merger acquisitions in the United States using like government money. So if I had to go back and tell my 18-year-old businessman self anything, it would have been use, SBA loan programs to buy boring businesses in America, um, and copy what works, and then add value in holes in the market, and make it your own thing, but copy structures and systems that work. Definitely would tell myself not to reinvent the wheel. Lily, can you bring me a bottle of water? I think I have one at my desk. Yeah, I mean, everything can be noise if it's not signal. Signal tells you something that's real and not necessarily emotional, even if it comes from an emotional place about your service or your product. So the way that works is, thank you. The way that works is if someone actually has the product and it makes them feel a certain way, then that's still real about your product. So it's worth listening to. Noise, it can just be haters, but it may not even be haters. It may be people who really consider themselves to be aficionados of whatever it is you do. But if they're not doing it with you, they don't matter. Because whether you do it or not, you're still not going to like win them as a client, right? Like if you look at that statistically, like if you engage with marketing companies and you look at the actual data behind that, if they're not doing business with you, the likelihood that they will do business with you is like less than 5%. So listening to people who are not going to do business with you doesn't make any sense. It's not helpful in any way, shape, or form. So it's noise. It becomes noise. Cool beans. Take care, bro. Always learn something new from you. Yeah, 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 for sure. Always lovely having you. Yeah. So it's going to be from stakeholders, not necessarily clients, right? So if you have shareholders, they're going to be signal, right? Because they win if you win, right? So what they're telling you is going to be locked on. So that's going to be signal. Um, if you have stakeholders who are not shareholders or clients, right? It's like if you're a government contractor, the government becomes a stakeholder. So if they have some feedback for you, that's fine. That's probably signal, right? If you have bank loans and the bank is telling you stuff, they're telling you stuff to get their loan money back, right? So like they're invested in what you're doing. That's signal, right? So noise are people who are not stakeholders. And in this world of social media, everybody think they got that to open their mouth. That's all noise. Even the people who are telling you you're doing great, it's also noise. Right? So you don't want to get like overconfident with people who are not stakeholders in what you're doing, telling you what a great job you're doing. Because if you're doing such a great job, how come they're not engaging with you in any meaningful way? Right? So even that is noise. So staying on signal means that you're not, the negative noise isn't pushing you off course, and the positive noise is also not pushing you off course. That's where people have the most issue. They can typically get to the point where like they get rid of the negative noise and they stop letting it bother them, but they let the positive noise gas their head up, which gives them blind spots. So you shouldn't let anybody gas you up, and you shouldn't let anybody tear you down. You should just stay focused and stay on signal. Yeah, that's why I'm happy it can help. I know a lot of this would have helped a younger me, but I also know a younger me, it would have been difficult for them to accept the advice unless it came from some, like I was always, before it became a meme, I was always like, I'm not listening to you unless you got the life that I want, right? Where now I know that like when I missed the first time, like when I had my first big failure and like became homeless, I was probably the wisest. Like that probably was the time to like really listen to me, right? And there's a lot of folks who like came back from those days who were like, "Damn, I would be rich had I done what you told me to do." Like back when you were homeless, and I was like, "You're homeless. Why would I listen to you?" And that was the time to listen to me, right? And so I kind of learned through experience that like, okay, maybe dial that back, maybe, you know what I mean? Because there are people who have like the life I would want to live because their father gave it to them. Should I listen to them? Like, you know what I mean? Maybe, you know, if the right knowledge was passed on, maybe, but there's a what, a 70% chance that I shouldn't listen to them because 70% of generational wealth households lose a generational wealth in the second, you know, generation. So it's one of those things where it's like, I don't know. What? Some comments were filtered. Tap comments with the I symbol to review and approve. Huh. What was filtered? I can't see the comment. Yeah, I can't. I don't know. If you wrote something to me, TikTok didn't like the way you wrote it. So think about how you wrote it, write it again, and see if TikTok lets it through. Some comments in this live were filtered to protect the community's experience. Huh. All right. Watch what you say on TikTok, guys. But yeah. No, I never see anything like that on YouTube. Yeah. But you guys don't ever really say anything too wild on YouTube. Up now, TikTok is challenging me. I gotta solve a puzzle now. All right, there we go. Yeah. TikTok's a different animal. It does have like better features though, but it's a different animal altogether. Oh, there's the little. Okay. What's the comment that it's asking me to approve? I'm pressing the thing. All right. Uh, let's see. Okay. How do you start building wealth? You're homeless and in Kenya. Like when I was homeless, I did start generational wealth while I was homeless, but um, I like ate first. You know what I mean? So if you're homeless, like you're gonna want like I picked up cans and took them to the recycling plant and got paid for the aluminum that I turned into the recycling plant. So like if you want to make a way, you will. But that's what I did when I was homeless. I went to the bars and dug through nasty ass trash cans full of vomit and, you know, stale beer and pulled out the beer cans every weekend after the partying was done. And I crushed the cans and took them to the recycling plant and sold aluminum every weekend to, you know, the recycling plant. So that's how I did it. Let's see. Uh, hi, Erna. How are you? Am I Indian? I'm not sure what kind of Indian you're talking about, but regardless of which kind of Indian you're talking about, I am not. Yeah, I have zero DNA from India and zero Native American DNA, if that's what you're talking about. So, No, I can't remember the name. Actually, I can probably look it up. They're probably still there. I can't remember the name of the recycling, but actually, now that you say that, I am gonna look it up. Recycling plant. Let's see what we got. Yep, that is it. Laurel Street Recyclers Incorporated in Reading, Pennsylvania. Laurel Street Recyclers Incorporated. Yep. Reading is actually spelled reading. Yeah. So yeah, if you're there, they'll probably. I mean, I don't know who's working there now. If you could drop my name, they'd probably remember me. I'm a 3D creative. Can't find jobs. Is there a way I can modify? That might be your problem, man. You know what I mean? Like, I I had a criminal justice degree, and I dug through trash bags and took out, beer cans and crushed them and sold the aluminum. So, like when you're homeless, you can't be picky. So, you're homeless, but you're on TikTok using a smartphone to talk to me, talking about being a 3D creative. I don't know. There might be a mindset issue there. You got to get somewhere first. Then you can start being picky. Yeah, I don't do it too often. I don't do it too often. Nice to see you though. I had some time tonight. Yeah. Yeah. No, so for me it was, I don't know. I've always felt responsible for the next generation. And so I was getting a little over $500 a week in aluminum when I was, when I was homeless. And so at first, like I said, I got myself eating, and then I got myself like a room at the YWCA. And then I knew about compounding though. You know what I mean? It's like sometimes you don't know what you don't know, but I knew about compounding. So I started putting like $200 away to be compounded for the next generation. I didn't have any kids. I wasn't married. I didn't have any kids. But I was like, F this, like homeless sucks. So if I ever do have kids, I don't ever want them to be homeless. So, I started putting that away and just letting it compound. And that's all it takes. So like the money part is always easy when you're doing generational wealth, but generational wealth does not benefit you. It only benefits the next generation. So you can put tiny money away and let it compound, and if it sits for 60 years, the grandkids are going to love it, but that's not going to help you. You're going to be dead in 60 years. You know what I mean? Like if you're listening to me now, right? You're at least like 18, 19, 20, so you're talking about being 85. Like I hope you are alive, but the odds are, you know what I mean? That's not going to be the case. So if you have to let that money compound for 60 years before it becomes anything, it's for the next generation. That's why it's called generational wealth, right? So I just knew like there's no way, if I got something to say about it, if I can do something to prevent the next generation from being in this situation, then it's my responsibility to do that. And so, I built in that way. But like I said, there's plenty of people who are like not in a bad situation at all and are still too selfish to put something away for, the next generation. So it's not a standard mindset, that we see. We've been doing this for years. So in the last 15 years, we've seen People who think they care the most about their family are the most selfish when it comes to their family. So, you know. Yeah. It's bad. Kenya just made the most sense. That's why. Yeah. It's not for everybody though. Like we have relocation people that we like tell to go somewhere else. It's not like we just because we do Kenyan relocation doesn't mean that we're like selling like ooh Kenya Kenya Kenya. Like no, it has to make sense for you. You know what I mean? So if it doesn't, we won't bring you here because like our clients, we're typically there for them for like the next 7 years. Now, some of them try to go off on their own. Most of them regret that. But some of them, you know, try to do that and like whatever. So it's up to, they don't have to stay with us for 7 years, but we're typically there for them for 7 years because it takes 7 years to get to either their dual citizenship or their permanent residence. So like we're not one to like set people up for failure. They can sure that they fail anyway, right? So there's that. Typically happens with guys who are weak-willed and single. Unfortunately, it also happens with married guys. But typically weak-willed men, they'll start like dealing with manipulative women, and then the women will start telling them like whispering in their ear like, "Oh no, you can do this, you can do that, or you can get this faster, or you can do this cheaper, or like whatever." And the local terminology is washed. They're being washed, and so they fall for that. There, unfortunately, there's it is what it is. Some of them can bounce back. Like some of them will like call us and be like, so I did something, and then our lawyers will like go after whoever, but sometimes you can't find them. Sometimes they're not even like Kenyan. Like sometimes they'll lie and say they're Kenyan and they're like illegal Ugandan immigrants or something, and they ran back to Uganda after they stole, from the clients or whatever. But some clients can bounce back from that, which is great. Other clients get like washed, like that they give that person access to everything they have, and then that's the end of that. So, like we had perfect example. We had this guy, married guy. This was a few years ago. So any of my current clients that might think I'm talking about them, hopefully there's nobody that fits that description. And if you think you do fit this description, stop doing what you're doing. But, but years ago, program that's still available where like we buy you a luxury car, like you get this luxury SUV as part of your relocation. At the time, we used to only do business with this Kenyan auto manufacturer called Mobius that doesn't really exist anymore. So dude was married. There was a maid that he went and got. Like we have a service where we provide, a maid. You got to pay for it, of course, right? But somebody was in his ear, like, oh, don't pay them. Like you can get it cheaper. I know somebody. Blah 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 blah. So they put this maid in his house, right? Like a living maid. And the wife went back to the U.S. for whatever reason, and then he had to go back, like not permanently, like she went back for something specific, like a funeral or something. And then he had to go back because whatever it was. Oh, that's what it was. She went back because somebody got sick, and he was like, "All right, cool, like go see whoever." He's messing with the maid now, right? And then the person who got sick died. So then it was like, oh, there's a funeral. You got to come back too now. Like it's not just me visiting uncle in the hospital. Um, so he leaves the car with this maid, right? But the maid is cleaning the house. The maid has access to the house. So the title deed to the car is called a logbook in Kenya, right? So the logbook to the car is in the house. So if you got, it's like the pink slip in the United States, like if you got that pink slip, right? So she got access to the house and got the car. So by the time they came back, they forged whatever on the the title to the car, sold the car, took off. They were nowhere to be found. It was crazy, right? So that kind of dumb stuff happens, to people who are like really weak-willed and like let people just kind of talk them into any old thing. So unfortunately, we do see a bit of that, but for the most part, like the clients who just stick it out with us until the end are pretty safe. And then by the end, you kind of know, like now you know the games that could pop up and so on and so forth. And a lot of it is about not realizing the social economic level that you're currently on, because you instantly go up a couple rungs without really knowing it, right? So if you lay down with dog, then those wrong folks are going to be plotting on you. So it behooves you to recognize whatever new socioeconomic level you're on, and then associate inside, of the new socioeconomic level that you exist on. And folks that get good at that don't run into any problems at all. It's not just no. We see it both ways. It's not just the fellas, but the fellas are definitely susceptible to it. But no, we see it with the ladies too. We'll see ladies that will, we'll see ladies that will marry and not realize they're not actually married, and then it all comes undone. And it's really hard to like talk to people about that because they think they're in love and they think that you're hating on their relationship. So it's really hard to counsel people about, especially people who are not like your friends. They're like your clients. You know what I mean? So it's really difficult when you see them going a weird way to be able to counsel them on that. But we've seen all kinds of stuff. I remember there was a thing in Key, and there was another lady that something similar happened to. She wasn't a client though, so I don't know the particulars. So I won't even speak on her situation because I don't know. But we had a client in Key that got married, so she thought, and there was like this kind of traditional ceremony, and there is such a thing as a traditional marriage versus like a legal one. And so when she would like ask people, they'd be like, "Oh yeah, there is a traditional way. You could do it the traditional way." But this wasn't even that, right? Like this was like some like we vows, but there's nothing to it, right? There was, it wasn't a traditional marriage versus a legal marriage. It was like a sham marriage. And then homeboy like brought again a live-in maid. The live-in maid was his wife, and so they were in a place called Sunica in Key. They were, we had set them up there, and she you couldn't tell her nothing, and we were like, listen, the first place I lived was Key, so I'm like, I know Key traditions, I know Key history. Right, I damn near know Key language, right? There ain't no such thing as what you just went through in Key. I'm telling her, but they, she's not my buddy, she's my client. So they think, and at the time I wasn't. I'm married now. Maybe it's been different. Maybe they took me, differently. But I don't know. She's thinking like maybe he want me. You know what I mean? Whatever. But she was not, open to that conversation. So that sucks. Like when someone's going down the wrong way, and there's not a whole lot you can say to them. They're not like open to having that kind of conversation. Then it just is what it is. So in the end, she built a bunch of houses, bought cars and all of that, and whatever. And I don't think he walked away. I think she figured it out, or she like walked in on him and the maid, but him and the maid or him and his actual legal wife, and so the whole thing was crazy. Um, so yeah, and she moved somewhere. I forget. I think she ended up going to Malawi. I forget where it was, but we assisted her with that as best we could. But I mean that sucked. But you know, it's one of those things where you can only say something, and if they're not open to that, let adults do what adults do. Nah, it's not. So it's not particularly prevalent with our clients, because especially like again with that whole signal and noise thing. Like now we're really laser focused on our target client. When we were accepting target non-target clients right early on in in our business, we were kind of accepting more non-target clients and people that we probably should have turned away. And the folks that were really getting, everything's. We used to run into a lot of like American scam, like free consultations and stuff like that. Scammers love that shit. If they can get in your ear and not have to pay any money to get in your ear, they'll do it all day long. But you put up a paywall, all of a sudden 90% of them are gone, right? And so, we just had to learn those things slowly over time. And once we learned them, and once we locked in on our target client, and we only do business with our target client now, then that was it. Like we're good. Yeah, no, I have a kid now. Yep, I have one. We're thinking about adding one more. What do you mean? What do you mean? Why would I have to? Why would I have to have a baby mom? No, 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 no. No, I wasn't trying to make no kids and just leave some woman out there stranded. You know what I mean? I was very intentional about who I even put myself in a position to make kids with. So no, no, no. I didn't. I mean, I was over 40 when we had our first kid. It's like I don't know. What was I? 42, 42, 41, 41 maybe. Yeah, no, no, no. Just the one. What we are thinking about it. We'll make a decision on that probably in the next 6 months. See if we can get him a little sister, maybe. We'll see. Hi, Eva. How are you? Twins. Yeah, you tell her that. I'll let her know you said that. Oh, I have no idea. Why you ask me such weird questions? What's the temperature right now in Deani Beach? It is 86 degrees Fahrenheit. What's the temperature where you are? You guys ask me such random questions. Yeah, it doesn't get too cold here at night. In Nairobi, though, a matter of fact, since you then took us down this rabbit hole, what's the temperature right now in Nairobi, Kenya?
It's 65 degrees in Nairobi right
You
now.
heard that? 65. So it's 86 here at the beach. It is 65 at the capital. So definitely colder in Nairobi than at the beach. Jesus. It's like a beat. Can you guys hear that? It's like a beetle this big trying to fly. It's not working out for it though. Oh, that's here one. It's like a moth going to the lamp. Right. Yes. That was noise. Stay on signal. You're correct. Well done. Some people always ask me that. It's it's an unanswerable question, right? So I can't tell you like what businesses are good in Africa. Number one, right? But I'm assuming you meant Kenya. Even there, I can't. It's what you're best at. That's what it boils down to. Whatever you can do at the highest level, that's the best business for you. That's it. If you feel like you can do nothing at the highest level, you're lying to yourself. So then your first step needs to be adjusting your mindset. Because then typically what you can do at the highest level doesn't feel like work. So you don't consider it a work skill. So that's one of the first places to look. But if you feel like you don't have any skill at all, and there's like nothing you can do, the mindset issue is, it might require you asking people who know you well enough, or not even know you well enough, like you enough to be honest with you. Because people who don't like you but they're around you, or even if it's not like they dislike you, they just don't like you enough to tell you the truth. So the people who agree with you all the time, the people who never push back, like those aren't the people that you ask the question. The people who are challenging you and like letting you know that you're like doing the wrong thing when you actually like, not the haters, but like people who are like, and then you, it'll be like, oh duh, I knew that. You start changing your mindset and then you move forward from there. But it doesn't make sense to like, that's where you're at in your head, that like you don't do anything well. It doesn't make sense to take another step in a business direction. The next step needs to be a mindset shift at that point. Yeah, it could just be changing who you hang out with. It could be you getting like an online group of friends, like a Reddit or something like that, like looking up, you know, business mindset, you know, a step a day, right? Chop everything up into like one step, one step. Just keep stepping forward, one step at a time, one step at a time, and you'll be all right. Yeah. Yeah, not bro, you'll get there. If you want to get there. I mean, if you think you can't get there, you're right. If you think you can get there, you're right. So make a decision. But it is 9:47. I have been here for 1 hour and 25 minutes. I will take a last question from both of you guys. The last question from YouTube, last question from TikTok, and then I'm out of here. So if you got a question, ask it. Um, if not, then I am going to go to bed. If you're in the process of writing a question, just hit enter, and then I'll give you time to finish whatever it is you're typing. If not, then this is it. I will talk to you guys later. All right, it looks like that's it. Thanks for hanging out with me. I will talk to you guys another time.